So I come from LA. I wasn't born there, but I grew up there. And then we started recently a church that's really dear to my heart. It's a campus I look after. It's Mosaic Venice.
Come on.
Yeah. Okay. So when I say it like that, you gotta at least pretend like you care. Oh, I love you. Okay, so here's the thing about Mosaic Venice. Mosaic Venice isn't in Venice. It's in the city next to it, Santa Monica. We've been really blessed. We grew out of the building, the biggest building we could find in Venice, and now we're in Santa Monica, and now we're desperately trying to crawl, scratch, and beg our way back into Venice. And so it's kind of this joke that we say, hey, welcome to Mosaic Venice, but we're actually in Santa Monica. Yeah? I don't know. So, and then just recently, we took our team and we started a new campus, and it's in Orange County. If you've ever seen The O.C., it's a terrible show, but it's pretty accurate about what goes on in Orange County. So we've been undertaking that, and so we do church on Saturday nights, we do church on Sunday mornings, and my team is just legends. They never sleep. And then I asked them to give them breaks, and they just refuse to do it. So I'm really grateful for them. Okay, so my parents named me Aaron, which is ironic that Kevin said it with one name, because I always really frustrated that they didn't name me Moses. One, if you know the story, you know why. And secondly, Moses McManus sounds like the best boxer you've ever seen. You know what I mean? And I'm a little skinny, but I feel like I'm scrappy. I feel like it would have been good. But growing up, I always had this interesting kind of like love-hate relationship with my name. My dad's name is Erwin, and then they named me Aaron. So, and then everyone spells it with an E-R-I-N, which is like the female version of the name. So they think I'm the female version of Erwin pretty much, which is always awkward, but it's great when I had to forge my dad's signature in school. But basically we had this love-hate relationship with Aaron. I always find it interesting because in the Bible, right, we talk about Moses. Moses is the one who couldn't speak on his own, so he asked God to give him someone, and he gave him Aaron, right? And I feel like I resonate more with Moses than I do with Aaron. I feel like I resonate more with the person who can't speak than the person who can. God, why did you name me Aaron when I'm supposed to be Moses? And there's just this like, and don't laugh, that's like sad. But it brought me to the story, and anybody a Harry Potter fan? Be real. Okay. I love them all. All Harry Potters, I love them. I love them, I think, because my mom wouldn't let me watch them when I was a kid. She's like, it's witchcraft. I was like, yes, it is, but it's not real. And so anyways, I didn't title this message, but the subtitle that I have next to Moses is The Boy Who Lived. He's the real Harry Potter.
Come on.
It's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
It came to me on the plane because I had this story, I had this idea, and then I realized, is it thundering outside?
Yeah.
God, are you out there? So the boy who lived, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know the story?
Yeah.
A little bit?
Yeah.
My dad goes, yeah. We're going to start Exodus 2. It says, now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket along the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. I find it interesting, like, where we get our names, right? Yeah. Do you ever wonder, like, where you get your name? Yeah. Do you wonder? Yeah. It's interesting. My dad has my last name's a fake name. It's an alias. His stepdad was a criminal. I'm not a criminal. So I'm the first real McManus in our whole family. I was the only one born a McManus, right? It's pretty unique. And then they named my sister Mariah. Have you ever heard the song Tremble? Yeah? Yeah. Jesus, Jesus, make the darkness tremble. That's my sister. They should have just named her Tremble. Because when you see Mariah, she's like this little 5'4", okay. Do you not like this talk? She's this little 5'4", passionate, loves Jesus, has a husband. She's the younger daughter. And as being like the older single son, it's just awkward, you know? I was her best, I was like, what do they call it? I was her best mate at her wedding. I stood on the girl side. It's weird. I stood on and she literally said, you have no responsibilities. I don't expect you to do anything. Just stand there and look good. And hold the ring, which I lost. And I always find it interesting because you have this relationship to your family, right? That's odd. You have this relationship to your family that's odd. And this moment in the Bible has nothing to do with my sister, but it does have to do with your name and the calling behind it, right? So, two things right here. What happened before this moment where we find out that this mother gives her son and puts her in the basket and puts her down the Nile, puts him down the Nile. This thing happens. Pharaoh basically says, kill all of the boys, the young boys. So what Moses actually is Moses is once in a generation. It's interesting, right? Whatever's happening from this point on, Moses is the one son, firstborn son, who's survived, right? It survived. So we go, and I have to just go and have the feeling with the mother. Imagine the pain that you felt. Imagine the brokenness you had, the loss you had, that I have to actually release this boy, not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing the calling on his life. I had to release him into this river and hope to God that Pharaoh's daughter finds it. And I just think that it's interesting as Moses to live this life and grow up in this story with this weight and pressure, being the one in a generation kind of person, right? But I also think on the mom's side, imagine just the pain that you had to actually release something in order for that person and that thing to receive something, right? I think it's really hard for us as young people to understand that the generation before us actually had to release us for us to receive something. Right? Okay, this is what's going to happen. I don't say a lot of good things. I said one good thing. So when I say it, you got to get a little bit louder than that, right? So when the people that came before you, when they release you to do something, you have to receive the thing that comes after, right? So I have this identity issue. I'm the son of Erwin McManus. If you know, it's like Denzel Washington being your dad in the preaching world. I stood right there as I was preparing, getting ready for this message, and he's just veins popping out, Braveheart, Training Day, last scene. And he walked off, and I texted one of our guys. I said, could you bring him back here? And he goes, hey, you good? And I said, you really couldn't have taken it easier before I had to preach after you? It's not fun. And I've always struggled with this identity thing. I always try to figure out who I was. Mariah was the talented singer. My mom is the woman who's trying to save the whole world. She builds houses in LA for families who don't have any money. She goes to Africa. She goes to Bangladesh. We sleep in nice hotels. She sleeps on the floor. And she is a brilliant, beautiful, amazing communicator. She is where I got my strength from. My dad's where I got the skinny jeans. But I've always struggled with this identity thing. And I think that as pastors or creatives or artists or accountants, we can all be in this place where we struggle with our identity, yeah? And I think Moses was in this place where I couldn't imagine being the boy who lived, being adopted by these kings, these pharaohs, and then going into his calling where God brought him and said, hey, I want you to go back to your people, where he goes back to. Imagine how awkward that would be, yeah? I know how awkward it is. Every time I sing worship, Mariah looks at me and goes, huh. You know what I mean? And when you just don't fit in, anybody ever feel like you just don't fit into the calling that you have? You ever feel like that? No, you feel perfect, guy on the 13th row. Okay, good. It must be a thing. But I think the thing that I struggled with most, being Erwin's son, was that I wondered if there would ever be a place for my voice, right? And just being really honest, they call me, in church, they call me the Swedish kid, because I have no emotions. I have one emotion. I'm like OCD and angry sometimes. And the other times I smile. And then you've got Erwin McManus, who's this dynamic, beautiful, kind, loves Jesus, didn't grow up in church, didn't grow up with parents who knew where to take him, and yet he became this brilliant genius that's once in a generation. And so how do you become the son of the guy who's the once in a generation guy? It's an identity struggle, right? But I think we can all have that in our lives, whether it's our ministry, our pastorship, our artistry, wherever it is, and it's how that we actually hang in between those two things that we struggle with, right? I struggle all the time following my dad, like today. He comes up, he preaches a fire, I come up, I'm like just trying to light the firecracker. I'm like, let's go, come on. I know we can do it. I've been to Disneyland. But really, I remember being young, and we started a company. He started a company because I really just didn't believe in God at all, and I was struggling with my faith, and I had an early experience when I was 4 or 5, and I knew I loved Jesus because I knew I loved my dad, and he loved Jesus, and it's so interesting how powerful the name of Jesus is. You can love him through his reputation, even if you've never had an experience with him yet. So interesting, right? I fell in love with someone that I didn't even know because I loved the person that loved me. And so I was 4 or 5 and then kind of had a rough start with the church. I didn't like them. We grew up in a church that was before Mosaic, and they hated me and I hated them, and I was like the sweaty kid who was like running through the halls, and we'd get in fights, and I think one time I almost fell through the roof during worship because I climbed into the attic and the barristers and my foot went through one of the lights, and I was that kid. Any pastor's kids in the room? Are you all super well behaved? Absolutely not. There's like insane asylums, and then there's places for us. Where am I going? We're going somewhere. You good? We're gonna get there. Yeah? Okay, come on. So growing up, hated the church, hated the people in the church. I'm sorry. Hated the building, hated the people in the building, hated the songs, hated the way it felt, hated everything about it except for Jesus. I kind of figured that Jesus was good, and then I figured my family loved Jesus and they were pretty good too, but I couldn't figure out why they loved everybody else, and that was kind of the issue with me, right? I was like, I can get the Jesus and the you part, I can't get the everybody else part. I think sometimes as the church, we can so easily be the everybody else. I look at it now, having a small campus, it's so hard to love the one person who's so hard to love, right? I'm like, I'm young, I'm 30, and I look at some of these guys and I'm like, my goodness, I just wish you would not talk. And I'm sorry, this is real. Erwin has books, I have me. So there's really nothing you can do. You cannot buy my book. I don't have them. I'm gonna be real. But it's hard loving that one person, right? It's hard loving that one person, but I was that one person. And so building church and building a place with someone who struggled with an identity, I think the one thing that we've always wanted to do is we have this phrase, it says, come as you are. Yeah. Nirvana sang a song called Come As You Are, And then they're not the ones who created it. We took it, we put it on a neon sign, and it's the only thing that sits in our lobby. And the thing that we say before every single service is, hey, it doesn't matter where you came from, we just want you to come exactly as you are. And I think it's interesting when we're the church and we're wherever we are, we have these preconceived notions on where people are coming from, right? Did you ever say that? You've never judged anybody ever? You're perfect Christians. It's amazing. This is the best church I've ever been to. This is the greatest place I've ever been to in my whole life. Get back to the story, yeah? Okay. Which part of the story? Okay, sweet. You good? All right. We're going to skip ahead a little bit because chapter 3 and then 4, and then Moses is having this conversation with God, and God's basically saying, hey, I'm calling you out of the wilderness. He sees the burning bush. I find it really odd that it was a burning bush, because those things don't burn, and not like they don't speak. They speak. This bush happens. God speaks. Moses listens, and I find it odd because I think it's something that I've always struggled with. God calls him to the thing that he hates to do the most. You ever feel that? My church has lots of artists. They feel really called to their art. So then I send them to the cleanup team. Because I'm like, you're called to sing. Like, I get it all the time. Hey, I'm called to be your worship leader. I go, that's amazing. Sing from the toilet. See, it's like swirl it. See if those things make some noise. Or we have an amazing setup team. They get there at 5 a.m. every morning because we don't have a venue. And I'm like, hey, you want to lead worship? Then let's see how you can pack all the music gear first. Let's see how you can unpack it. Let's see if you can stay till 1 p.m. and not go out afterwards and stay committed to certain things. I find it interesting that when people feel called to something, but they don't feel called to like work for it, right? We're going on tangents, but I think it's a high standard that we hold for ourselves, right? That I love children. I don't have any, but I love when they sing during church. It's the best thing ever, right? We have the first time we ever did an Easter service. This is just a side note. We had 4 kids, and at the end, because I didn't know what I was doing, I said, "Thank you guys for entrusting us with your kids. I don't have any." And the whole place went silent. And I was like, wait, I shouldn't have said that. We love your kids. And I find it interesting when we we have 2 stories. We have a downstairs for the adults, and we have an upstairs for the kids. And now we've grown into 16 kids, and they go buck wild, and we can hear them through the entire service. And we're a video venue, so whenever they get loud, we just raise the volume. And to the point where it's so loud, you just can't anymore. And you can just hear the kids. Okay, back to the talk. So Moses is talking to God. God calls Moses to speak. Moses says this: "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Because he's sending Moses back to the people that he had abandoned, that he had been separated from. Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." And the fact that it's a snake is weird too, but we're going to focus on this part. What is that in your hand? I feel like this is a generational call. What is that in your hand? Because I don't think it mattered that it was a staff. I don't think it mattered what was in his hand at all. I think if there had been nothing in Moses' hand, that was what God's promise to him was, hey, I called you to something. I'm never going to abandon you there. Hey, I called you to this mission. Hey, I called you to this space. I'm going to turn this staff into a snake. I'm going to turn water into wine. I'm going to change your world, and I'm going to give you every single thing that you need to succeed, but you're going to have to work really, really hard for it. Yeah. And I think sometimes in the church, I know that I have to give numbers every Sunday night and tell my dad, hey, this is how we did. And every Sunday night, I just pray that somehow a miracle, 1,000 people showed up. And I can be like, hey, we're the biggest campus in our whole church. And then he's always reminded me that the thing that matters is how many hands are raised at the end of the service and how many people came through your doors. right? And I think sometimes as church goers and church builders, we can focus so much on the experience and on the sign and the gift of Moses turning the staff into a snake, versus the fact that Moses said, hey, this is what I have, and God said, hey, I'm going to do something with it. It's not about the miracle, it's what God does with you in your life. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's not very good. It's all right. We're going to get there.
Yeah, man.
We get there. So what is that in your hand? What is that in your hand? I brought this to our team this week at a team night during midweek, and I said, hey, what is the thing that we're holding on to that occupies the space that God actually wants to occupy in our life, right? And I think it's so easy. Like I always find it funny when my mom yells at me for being on Instagram, though my job is literally Instagram for church. And I meet people all the time who go, hey, we have a bit of an Instagram following, and it's cool to meet kids who like, hey, I actually came to Jesus because I was scrolling on an Explore page one day, and I hit a church, and then it was, hey, come as you are, and then I came down from San Francisco, I came to church, and those are some of our team members, and I always find it interesting when we have a generation before another generation that always is saying, hey, the future that we're leaving to you, you're going to destroy. But I always find it funny because my parents told me, hey, you were the guinea pig, we didn't know what we were doing with you, so like you're going to be so much better off than what we were to you. And I go, that is exactly what the generation before should always do. Go, hey, you have no idea what you're doing, you're probably going to ruin it all, but it's going to be really great. And when you do and it all breaks, we're going to help you build it back up, and we're going to help you fix it, and we're going to give you the keys to the castle, and we're going to keep pushing forward, right? I think we need to be a come as you are like culture, not just on Sundays, right? We need to be, hey, you're really broken, you're really imperfect, you're really, really annoying. You want to be my worship leader, but I'm going to take you as you are. I'm going to reshape you, and I'm going to take the nothing that you have in your hands, and what God's given me, I'm going to give you, right? I think it's interesting that, okay. Is that rain? That's amazing. That's like the Notebook kind of rain. You know what I'm talking about? Like you're a bird, I'm a bird type of rain? No? Okay. Or like some Pride and Prejudice type of rain? No? Okay. All right. Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Fury? Wow, they don't let... We're going. This is ironic, huh, Dad? I'm the most OCD, ADD person in the whole world, and that's happening right now. Okay, cool. Let's do it. Let's just be louder than that, yeah? So there's this movie called Fury. It has Brad Pitt in it, who, like, men, we can be real. He's hot. He's cool. He was in Fight Club. And then he's this guy in Fury, and he drives a tank. Like, what's better than that? And he's got 17 million children from all over the world. This movie really stuck with me. One, I love war movies. I don't love war, but I love the stories of heroes, right? My dad is like the Braveheart guy. He's got all types of movie posters. He's got The Last Samurai. He's got Braveheart. He's got those, I don't remember any of the other ones, but he has so many of these. He has a Braveheart sword in our house. It's crazy. So I grew up just conditioned to love heroes, right? So this movie has this moment where Shia LaBeouf, and do you know who Shia LaBeouf is? Even Stevens, the Disney Channel classics. Shia LaBeouf and Brad Pitt are having a moment, and they basically choose to stand their ground. And I find it really fascinating that Brad Pitt, who in real life has said he's always struggled with his faith, is talking to this guy, Shia LaBeouf, who's a wild child in LA. And they're having this conversation about the Bible, and he says, whom shall I send? And he says, here am I, send me. Do you know that verse? Like, if you're a perfect Christian, you know that verse. It's like, Isaiah's my guy. But I find it so odd and so interesting and so fascinating because there's this moment where Brad Pitt and Shia LaBeouf are going back and forth, and he says, and he quotes this verse, and the whole movie, Brad Pitt is just brutalized him for his faith and just ripped on him for being religious and being the chaplain and being the priest and making fun of him and talking about baptism and just destroying him. And then this one moment happens, and he quotes the verses, "Whom shall I send?" The Lord says, and he says, "Here am I, send me." And I find it so incredible that we get to be that in this generation. That if you look at Moses and you look at his mom and you look at these two people who have a crossroad of one generation passing to the next, one moment passing to the next, how can we in our own lives pass what we have to the next people, right?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't pass anything then. See how that goes. We're supposed to be changing the future, but I think so many times we cling to the past. We cling to the present. We don't actually move, and then so we die, right? You look at societies all across the world. You look at stories in our lives. You look at people who become afraid. You look at relationships that become stale because they clung to the person that they thought they knew, not the person that's evolving with them, right? And I find it interesting and amazing that God was having this kind of relationship with Moses, saying, "Hey, I know you and I remember you. You're the boy who lived. I helped you live." And Moses is going, "Hey, no, I can't even remember. They're not going to believe me. These people don't know me." And I think so many times we look at faith and we look at Jesus and we look at leadership and we look at our teams and we go back into our little holes at night when we drive in our car back home after preaching a semi-average message and go, "They all hated me." And it becomes so much about us rather than about God. So much about us and our insecurities versus what actually God's doing in our life, right? Yeah? Okay. All right. One last thing, and I think it kind of applies to everybody, but I don't know like where you've come from in your relationship with Jesus, but I know that I had nothing. I didn't want to do anything to do with him, and I actually was like, my life was on kind of this downward spiral. I was living really quick, and I was 23 years old, and I remember having this one thought: I'm 23, and I could write a book right now about how much of a disaster my life is. Have anybody ever felt like that in their whole life? No? Okay, I'm the one pagan in the room. And then 23 kind of evolved, and I moved to New York, and I was out there, and I was like that nightclub kid who would go to I don't even know why. I didn't even like to drink, but I would go to these nightclubs because I was bored, and I was lonely, and I kind of forgot who I was, and I couldn't remember the relationship I had with God or the fact that he even loved me. I just remembered the fact that I could do whatever I wanted. It doesn't take much to run from your calling, and it's interesting how no one teaches us how to forget God. But God never actually forgets us. I remember so many times that God would show up in the most peculiar places. And I think it's interesting that we get to choose God, but that God always chooses us, that God always chooses to show up in these moments. You don't clap yet, no, because I'm not there yet. I wish I was, but not. We choose God at some point in our lives, but I love that God has always showed up. And I look back now and I'm like, dang, there was God. Dang, there was that moment where I could have died and there was God. Hey, there was that moment where I should have went one direction, but I went the other direction, that was God. Hey, I actually got out of a cab on some random Friday night. I walked into a door guy and he said, "Hey, will you come to my church?" And I said explicitive no. And then he said, "Okay, cool, just come to lunch with me." And I remember that was like the most shocking thing because I came from a culture of, you do the right thing. You're the pastor's kid. You show up, you listen to Mariah sing, you listen to your dad preach, and then you have to be really, really, really happy to everyone all the time, even the people you don't like. And I don't think the church grows like that at all. I'm a little like cold to some people, but I also think that introverts can actually do some good too, right? But I remember that guy who said, will you come to church? And I said, no. And then he said, okay, cool, let me just take you to lunch. And he took me to lunch, and I had no friends in New York City yet. And then there were two cute girls, and he was like, hey, they're going to come to church too. Do you want to come? And I was like, dang it. And it became an issue. So then I went to church. And then they stuck me in the middle aisle when they were singing some, you know that Hillsong band. And then some Australian guy started preaching at me, and who I didn't like. And I remember my heart was beating out of my chest. And I remember walking out of that service going, I hated everything about this except for the people for the first time in my life. And that the guy who I was in my mind just berating and talking so much trash and destroying, I said, you're the most unhealthy person you know right now. Maybe that guy is making you uncomfortable because you're not actually a good person anymore. And I think and then it comes back to come as you are, right? I think I was in a moment where someone said, hey, you can come however broken you are, and you can come and to know a God that I know. And I'm going to preach an imperfect message, and I'm going to help you get one step closer to where God has actually called you, right? And then it was interesting because it instilled in me this faith and this ability to see the fact that it doesn't end with me. That if it does, we're all in trouble, right? Like Americans, they just love themselves. But if it ends with me, we're all in trouble. If it ends with that guy's message stopping with me and it doesn't actually go to the next person, then we're never going to have a moment where we break free out of our captivity. We're never going to have an Israel moment where there's a Moses who can come and actually speak to us. I think it's incredible that we have technology, but nothing can change for the Holy Spirit. Like, you can watch a message on YouTube, your life can be changed, but you walk into this room, however good or bad worship is, however good or bad the speaker is, there's a spirit that you guys bring that I can't explain. I came in and I was like, I'm going to cry. But it's such a unique experience and so different and contrasting to the first experience that I had coming into church for a long time, where I was like, oh, I want to throw up. I hate this place. And then you look at church now and you go, look at these beautiful people who are sitting thousands of miles away. I had to take 3 planes, 2 buses, and a backpack ride to get here. And they carry the Spirit more than I could have ever imagined in my whole life. Do you know the power that you guys hold inside your hands? What do you think that God can do with that power when you unleash it on a city who is known for how radical it can be in every area that you know? You hold something unique. Do you get that? Yeah. Like, Kevin's cool, and so is Esther, but they have the call of God on their life, and it makes coming over here so fascinating, so interesting, so peculiar to watch people create something that I'm like, I'm from the coolest city in the whole world. I think I'm awesome. And then you've got this, and you. And if you had turned it all off and the rain was just there and Kevin was speaking, I think our lives would all be changed no matter what. And I think just some people hold that power. And I don't know if you're in this room and you feel like Moses, God's called me to a place that I just don't even imagine that I could ever accomplish. I want you to know, if I can get up here and give like a message, nervous, I want to throw up. I thought there's actually a hole right here. I thought about throwing up in there a couple times. I was like, we're just going to have a spontaneous prayer moment. I'm going to throw up real quick and we'll keep going. If I can do this, you can take your open hands and let God put something in there and have a miracle and see where it takes you, yeah? And honestly, I don't know you, but I already like you and I already love you. And I see young people in here and I'm like, dang, you showed up for this. You leaned in for this. You trust the vision. You're expectant. Your churches represent all over Southeast Asia and Australia, the country that's taking over the whole world. Great coffee and songs and people. But yeah, and then my prayer for you today, if I can have one at all, is that as the band runs, because I'm just dipping out of this so fast, is that you will answer the call that God has put on your life, that you won't forget the fact that you were placed, that you had purpose, that God loves you, that he created you, and that he set you apart. Whether you went down the Nile or not, somehow you got here to this place. And I want to encourage you that wherever you take it is between you and God, but also I hope that it never becomes a secret. That you might not be able to invite everyone in this whole country, but I have a feeling that that's why you're here. Come on. Right? That you're not just supposed to have one building that fits 1,000 or a couple of thousand. You're meant to have this whole block. Come on. You know, if you golf clap one more time, I'm going to throw this mic at you, just for real. Do you know what golf is? Yeah, that's how they clap. I said I think you should have all the buildings in all of Malaysia, so you should maybe, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's people in here who look the part. Whoa, those are really loud. People in here that look the part but aren't actually acting it. That look the part but actually aren't in love with Jesus the way they think they might be. And I want you to know that it doesn't matter where you go. This is a place, and we are a people that are always going to love you. They're always going to believe in you. They're always going to believe that God's called you to more, that you knowing Jesus and Jesus knowing you is more important than how perfect of a life you live. I was super broken. Like so broken that like this rain would have just come right through me. And it's fascinating to look at people my age and the next generation and just go, my goodness, like I just want to wrap you up and help you, and everything that I have you can have. I look at Mariah writing Tremble and I go, please let me be a launching pad for your voice. And not that you need it, but I almost feel like that was Moses, right? That was this guy who had a whole people on his back, and he basically said, hey, you're going to go further than I can ever take you because God's on your side, right? So we're going to pray, and you just stretch out your hands, and we're going to lift up the people around us, and then we're going to keep going, and you're going to get Denzel Washington back. But I thank you for letting me speak to you for a little bit, yeah?